Okay, this one comes from Justin. I watched 505, WAL 505, he's talking about. And as Jerry and Todd match was going on, Todd Hutchings, that is, I felt like I saw a look of fear and concern on Michael Todd's face. What do you guys think? I think I triggered him a little because he called me an idiot in one of his videos, and which makes me think that he is a little scared, which he should be, in my opinion. Now, I can go a little bit on this. I did not notice a look of fear and concern. I think that it might have been a look of relief. Jerry was in trouble in one of those matches. And the fact that Hutchings was able to roll him out like that and make that match competitive and almost to his side of the table and almost taking one win, I don't know. I don't think that Michael Todd is afraid. There might be some psychological stuff just based on the fact that Jerry has beat him, and I don't know. It's I know that Michael would have preferred to have the Devon match just because of status and profile, like the profile that would come to that match based on exposure and Devon's following. I don't agree that he was scared. Gabi?
There are two things that drive driving forces behind elite athletes. One is a fear of not being who they think they are, a fear of losing their identity as a champion. The second one is not much fear, but an absolute pursuit of excellence and seeking their potential regardless of the wins and losses. Todd Hutchings is the latter of the two. Michael Todd, much like Devon, is the former. Much of what they do, much of how they act, is based on fear of what happens if they lose their identity. They need to win to keep that identity. So I don't really recall the expression on Michael Todd's face, but I could tell you that if Michael Todd has a fear, whether he admits it or not being the face of a league, not being the number one guy in the world, not being known as a top 5 arm wrestler on the planet, causes him duress. He needs that in his life, much like Devon does now, and their actions prove that. Todd Hutchings could do anything in life. He can never arm wrestle again, and his level of pride and dignity would not go down 0.5% based on optics or what people think or where his name is circulating within a league. Those are two completely different men in this world, two different completely type of athletes in this world, in my opinion. Polar opposites even. So was he scared? I don't know if he was scared. I don't recall seeing it, but I believe he is scared. I believe he's consumed by fear, much as Devon is now consumed by fear.
Okay, we have a bunch of questions on the feed. We'll get to it, guys. Ray Cote and other guys on there. We will get to your questions, but I want to wrap up the ones that came in on the email first. The question is it, this is from Matt Glasser, how do you say that? It's going to be easier in the foreseeable future for someone to get on a WAL table by building a channel into a recognized brand by grinding away at progressively tougher tournaments. Jujimufu, whose channel I do enjoy, is going to be in the WAL, and it's essentially because his notoriety, as well as his friendship with Devon Larratt. Not to discredit him, he's obviously a freak athlete in his own right. Blue Bowen, though, already accomplished, is a similar case. I mention this because it occurred to me that SB could increase his odds of getting matches by simply building this channel into a recognized and respected authority on arm wrestling. I already regard it as such. I love what you guys are doing. Thank you. So, thoughts on that statement?
Well, we live in a world now that it's not so much what you do, but what you can bring to the party. So that's. But in all reality, for sure, if our channel exploded, and you were a YouTube sensation, you present more value to them as you compete. You're on the card. You bring in more views. You bring in your audience automatically. Maybe 20% or 30% of our audience would watch anyway. If you're not on the card, but if you're on the card, all of a sudden 100% of our audience is in. that's their motivation behind Ryan or Juji Mufu. It's the way of the world right now. It's what can the optics behind something, and can you bring their followers? Everything's about views. Everything's about bringing in an audience. Not necessarily right or wrong. It's the way it is. So yeah, for sure, I can see that being a motivating factor for them if this channel becomes bigger.
I think it's an accurate statement. I think that
sure.
Legitimately being a good arm wrestler plus having a social media following is a great way to get into the WAL. It's not the only way. I do think that Juji, as an arm wrestler, is a novice at best. He will eventually be there, but he's not there yet, and he's not accomplished much and doesn't have a high level of knowledge about the sport. Bowen, on the other hand, is actually a pretty decent arm wrestler. And with his following, is it surprising that he's gotten a shot in WAL? I don't think so.
No. Ryan, when he did get his chance, he exploited it, and he put on a good show. So the danger in this is like one name keeps popping in my mind, like Brendan Elselsor. Am I spelling that right or pronouncing it right? Anyway, from Pennsylvania, I think he was mentioning how he's been going to these wall events, cleaning up, doing really well, and he's come a long way in the last couple of years, and he's also a very electric puller. Why doesn't he get a shot? Like, he has no followers, he doesn't have a YouTube channel. But if you start giving someone like Juji Mufu the opportunity, who's a level 1, level 2 arm wrestler, who, like you said, novice pretty much, who pretty much can get to a table and doesn't really know how to set up yet on a professional level, and you give him chances only because you can attract his audience and his followers over a guy who's been plugging your events, going to your events, training, who's a veteran puller, who's colorful, who's animated, who's versatile, who's I think that's a dangerous practice. So I mean, they have to be careful. You do not want to start bringing in these guys and dissuading or pissing off the actual level 3 arm wrestler who's busting his ass to try to get on the card. Like, I'm not saying you can't throw in this guy every now and then, but Juji Mufu would have to get to a level 3. He would have to start winning. He would have to go to Wall, South Carolina. Like, he would have to go to a South Carolina Wall and beat Chad Silvers or give or do something dramatic for them to say, okay, yes, he has an audience, he has a following. And now he's obviously a decent arm wrestler, low-level, mid-level pro, high-level pro, whatever, but now we can justify putting him on the card. But if you put him on the card prematurely for him proving himself as a legit pro-caliber arm wrestler, you open yourself up to a lot of criticism and almost to looking unprofessional, I think.
It reminds me when CM Punk got his shot in the UFC, and they could not find a guy shitty enough for him to beat. I don't think they'll have that problem with Juji, but we'll see.
Yeah,
see what happens.
tread carefully, Wall, because Brian Bowen was one thing because he was an established puller when you brought him in, and you were able to extract his audience as well. But Juji Mufu, he's not even established. He has yet to win one tournament. He has yet to win a match versus a legit arm wrestler. I mean, he hasn't done anything. So I think that's I think that's a very, very delicate subject. They got to tread very carefully with that.
Yeah, and
bring him in on a mic. Bring him in to comment. Bring him in, whatever. But to bring him in on a card, who would you put him against? I mean, Wilmot would eat him up. I mean, who do you put him against? No disrespect to Wilmot, but so it's touchy. It's touchy.
Well, we got some training questions. So we got a bunch. We'll lump them into the same kind of group here. Talk about your against Mike Miller again. He says, can you talk about your current training split in terms of both general and specific exercise? Also, the current weights you're using for your key lifts. Let's try to keep it high level on this one because we could go down a rabbit hole that lasts for days on this one. Training split, Gabi. You want me to take this one first?
Yeah. Go.
I divide my weeks into, it's very simple. It's 1 week of power, 1 week of volume. And in a 2 week period, I hit a day of basically hand at wrist, a day of elbow flexors, a day of training side pressure. I duplicate that on week 2, but it's a different setup with and some different exercises for volume. And in that 2-week period, I hit everything else one time. I have abandoned all of the powerlifting movements as far as trying to get as big and strong as possible, as humanly possible. I still do bench, I still do squats, I still do all that stuff, but it is not all the way to failure per se. It is more to fatigue and training it for general health and strength, because I'm trying to focus just on getting stronger for arm wrestling. That's about as high level as I can get on that without really breaking it down into it. You guys go to my other YouTube channel, you can see a lot of the stuff I do already, but it's constantly evolving, and I'm constantly taking out exercises that I don't think work and adding in ones that I do think work. Yeah, take it away.
There is no ideal anything in arm wrestling. I don't even think there's any ideal training paradigm in any type of athletic strength platform. I had a guy, Aaron McPhee from Toronto, Canadian boy, asked me to write him a program about a month ago, and I did reluctantly. I'm always reluctant because the reality is we want to create something, and we want to program a training, and we want to do something, and then we want to execute it. For me personally, I can get so detail oriented with this stuff that I end up spending more time with a notepad breaking things down than I do actually sometimes putting the work in the gym. For me, it's very, very simple. I want to attack the central nervous system. I want to kick the shit out of my body. I can't do it 2 days in a row. Sometimes I can't do it with only 1 day off. I've done lower body, upper body splits, different things like that. For me, the only thing that works is I wake up in the morning and I read my body, how it feels. Is there anything that I can tax to 100%? If the answer is yes, that's what I hit it. One exercise, 2 exercise, usually in an exercise that my body hasn't seen for a while, so it breaks through a plateau or it stimulates the most growth possible. If the answer is no, I go into a rehab type of arm, a lot of 12 to 15 rep arm wrestling stuff, just full motion stuff to try to get blood flow. If my lower body feels good but my upper body's racked, I'll do Zercher squats. I'll do some compound type lower body stuff. If my lower body's taxed and my upper body feels good, I'll do some rope climbs. I'll do some standing military press. It's just all I can do is read. If I tried to write a routine for myself and try to follow it, I'd overtrain and hurt myself because my body, with my job, my age, and I train. When I usually train, I train stupidly hard sometimes, and sometimes it takes me days and days to recover off certain exercises. So if I was to have to do bench twice a week or have to do certain things, theoretically, because I wrote it down, if I would have had to follow through with it and do it 2 times in a 10-day period when my body's not actually ready to do it again, it's just counterproductive. So I just read the situation and I try to pick an exercise or multiple exercises that I think can stimulate the most growth or the most reaction from my body, and that's where it goes. That's it. So it's very, very hard for me to how you arm wrestle, how you what your discipline is, how you pull, how hard you pull. When was your last tournament? What do you do for work? How's your diet, your age? There are so many variables to consider when one person tries to convey to another person, this is what I do, you should try it. It's crazy. It's insane.
And the subject of training, Raymond Cote says, when it comes to post-training, I jump into a tub of ice water right after training. What are your thoughts on that, Chris? I guess he doesn't want my opinion, so go ahead.
I don't have the patience for that type of shit. I've done cold showers to stimulate blood circulation. There's so many things in my training in my life that I make myself do that are very uncomfortable and unpleasant. I don't know if taking a warm shower out of the equation is what I want to do, but I think when it comes to healing quicker, it's diet and sleep. The ice bath thing, I've heard many athletes love it. For me, it's too much discomfort for the reward that it offers. When I'm eating very, very well, and I mean very, very well, 0 processed food, all whole food diet, and I'm sleeping 6 hours a day. I work nights, so I sleep during the day. When I'm doing that, I heal very, very well. I don't think I need any other pseudo aids. So I've heard great things about it. I'm just not a guy that's going to put myself through that much pain. For me, it's not painful to have kale smoothies, to eat quinoa, white rice, fruits and vegetables, high quality, non-GMO protein. Not hard for me at all. To go into a 15-minute ice bath, like, come on, man. Like, I'm not saying it doesn't have merit. I'm just saying I'll get my healing done another way that's a little bit less unpleasant.
If I lived next door to a spa that had a cold pool and a hot pool next to each other,
Yeah,
I would do it. But for me to make an ice bath, the frequency and the difficulty and the inconvenience of doing that is too much for me. I do believe in the inflammation reduction instantly when you're sitting in a 2-minute long ice bath. I think I would do it if it was way more convenient for me to do it. I did actually attempt to do this when I went to the Worlds, and I was pulling 4 different classes in 2018. My plan was to do an ice bath after the tournament every day to reduce inflammation. Fortunately, the pool was ice cold, so I just sat in there. But it wasn't quite the same, and there's no way I could have done it. I'm in Turkey, and I can't even find a damn ice machine. But I do see the merit in it. I just think it's very hard for average people to put that into their routine.
yeah. I mean,
Randy Hebert. Yeah, go on.
No, if you're an elite athlete and you're looking to clean up a little bit of inflammation and you do everything perfectly, sure, the ice bath isn't a bad thing. But in certain cases, like unless you're at that level, there's so many other things you should be cleaning up in your lifestyle before you start playing around with water temperature.
That's true. If you're, come on, Ray. I mean,
yeah, like
put down the junk food and try something else before you get an ice bath. Like it's an extreme level of stuff. Like Hafthor does it, and he's world's strongest man. Like the average guy is not going to benefit too much from an ice bath or a cryogenic chamber. You can buy one of those. You can buy one of those for $10,000 and put it in your house. It's not going to replace diet and exercise. Like it's.
I remember a couple of months ago, Chuck Bardo, who's a big fan of mine, good buddy.
Oh, he loves you, man. You've always got something nice to say about him.
And he says, I have an appointment at a cryogenic chamber. And I'm like, dude, I've seen you post pictures in the last couple of days of eating hot dogs. Like, maybe just clean up the diet before you're spending $300 on ice chambers. Like, and talking directly to Ray, like, I've seen Ray took a picture or a video of his food cabinet the other day, and all I see was processed foods and processed supplements and synthetic supplements and powdered this and powdered that. Nothing was whole. Nothing was super clean. Maybe that's health food for some people. For me, it's junk. Well, stuff that causes inflammation. So I'm thinking, if you're eating like that and then you need an ice bath, why don't you just cut out the ice bath and eat better food? Like sometimes, I don't know. For me, if you're a super athlete, and that's the last thing you can do to maybe clean it up, sure. But other than that, I think most of us have 98% of us, 99% of us need to clean up other things before we look at water temperature.
Yeah, and are you training hard enough that you will get a benefit from jumping into it? Brock Lesnar does an ice bath. Brock Lesnar trains like a madman to the point where he eats cheeseburgers and has thousands and thousands of calories beyond anything we can even fathom because of the level of training he does. So jumping in an ice bath for someone like that is absolutely necessary. But this is relatively new stuff, and if all the other stuff's not on point.
We're arm wrestlers. It's our fucking arm wrestling.
Yeah, stick your arms in an ice bath.
I can tell you one thing that I've done over the last year is when I come home from a tournament, and I usually come home late at night, like 2, 3 in the morning, one thing I've noticed to increase recovery is I start climbing rope. Now, I won't climb rope to the point where I'm going to failure, but I'll climb a rope halfway up, stop, take 30 seconds, do it again. I'll do that 5 times. Not enough to engage tendonitis, but enough to get blood in all the parts that I need to get blood in. And I find that when I do that, I can train usually a day or 2 earlier than I would otherwise.
I am 100% in agreement with what you just said. And not necessarily the rope climbing, but always forcing yourself to get in the gym the very next day and get moving and get blood flowing into that area that you needed. Active rest is a huge thing in recovery. If you're just going to sit on your couch until you feel better, without actually getting any blood in there, it's going to take 3 times longer. Randy Hebert says, since you guys aren't fans of wrist curls, what would you suggest for strengthening the wrist? Having trouble with taller pullers bending my wrist back. Now, for me, I am not a fan of conventional wrist curls. That does not mean that I do not do static holds in a flexed wrist position or that I don't do a movement like a wrist curl on something like a country crush or an Ezreal handle or something like that. That is not what I think either one of us meant by that. I'm talking about sitting on a bench with a barbell trying to do a wrist curl where the fulcrum of that movement becomes unloaded at the top of the movement. That's what I mean. And even on a 45-degree angle, you can increase the effectiveness of a conventional wrist curl dramatically by doing that. There's a ton of exercises. And again, plugging my other channel, but there's my whole routine is over there. So, I mean, check it out. You'll see all the stuff I do for wrists. Gobby?
The wrist is huge, but the wrist is a very broad statement. When people say I went to a tournament, I lost my wrist. Did you really lose your wrist? For me, the wrist, hand, and fingers are all attached, and they work symbiotically. I see a lot of people go to a tournament and they grip someone who's top rolling, and the top roller opens, slightly opens them up, and then opens up the wrist, and then pins them, and then I lost my wrist. Really, you say you lost the wrist, but the initial point of impact was not on your wrist; it was on his pronation on your back fingers. That was the initial point of impact, which caused you to eventually lose your wrist, seemingly lose your wrist. So for me, when a wrist curl, and I'm like you, I'm not saying wrist curls don't work. Wrist curls have to stimulate what your hand is doing in a setup. So that's why I love, the country crush is decent, but I also love the wrist wrench, because the wrist wrench, and I put hockey tape on mine, so it's quite thick. It's about a 3-inch grip. And I put it to the point where it's everything I do with the wrist hand, it's putting emphasis on the edge of my fingers or flat finger strength. Engin Terzi used to emphasize the importance of flat finger strength over standard wrist curls, because if your fingers don't lose traction, your wrist will literally never go back. If you have super long fingers like Mask, okay, maybe the wrist becomes a bigger factor because your fingers have such a big grip. It's kind of like if you grab a golf club, no matter what pressure is put on your hand, that golf club is not going to rip out of your hand. But if I put the fat end of a baseball bat and I put 120 pounds of pressure open, it's possible that you could feel your fingers opening. So the length of your fingers in conjunction with your wrist strength play a bigger factor. But for me, being a containment guy, anything I do with the hand and wrist has to absolutely come with not only a thick handle, but a handle that's bridging and coming out from the bottom of my hand, much like in the wrist, in the country crush, I would attach it here. So as I'm doing my wrist curl or my back row, really, I don't do a curl. I never really do a curl. It's just basically a row back. The pressure the bulk of the pressure is on my back fingers trying to contain it, because that's when I pull a top roller or a high hooker, the initial point of pressure is coming off my back fingers from his pronator. It's not your wrist that stops pronation. The wrist never stops your opponent's pronation. It's a supporting factor. It's the back fingers that stops the pronation, especially when you start looking at low hand counter hookers or top rollers, 2 counter hookers. They're really looking to really exploit the lack of your strength in bottom fingers. I remember a good example was a fellow Canadian named Mark Krause. Pulled 176, 165 for many, many years, still does, I think. His son's, and massive hand. Probably has a hand your length, your size, but would often lose his wrist. His wrist would go back. And I remember thinking, practicing with him on the practice table and thinking his fingers just are long, and he has a big hand, but he just doesn't have much lower fingers, bottom finger strength. So for me,
I like what you said about the flat fingers. When I was in the late 90s, Miles went on a big tour down in the States, and he ran into Engin at one of those tournaments. Engin came to the United States a long time ago, and he did a tour of all of those little events that were happening that had a couple $100 for first place, and he won all of them. And he went multiple classes, and he went home with thousands of dollars in his pocket.
Yeah.
But the one thing he told Miles is that he did lots of chin-ups with flat fingers. So I immediately built a chin-up station that allowed me to do them flat-fingered. And I still, to this day, do exercises that incorporate that. Because if your hand doesn't move this way, you'll be a lot more successful.
Well, and where is your hand when you're setting up? This is your hand setting up, right? I don't care how you're setting up. So basically, there's sometimes I do one day of an hour of training of 3 exercises of flat finger. I don't have it. It's not with me right now. But on our next episode, I'm going to do a 2-minute segment, and I'm going to bring the 3 pieces of equipment I work with when I want to focus on flat finger strength, and I'll show it to our fans. But it's crucial. It's huge.
I'll bring mine as well.
Yeah.
I think that would be an interesting episode.
Yeah.
But it's amazing how many arm wrestlers come in and they grip people like this.
Yeah.
And if you can get this, that's way more effective from a leverage standpoint.
Yeah.
And it involves something that's counterintuitive at times, which is actually coming forward towards your opponent to get your hand in position.
Yeah. For fans out there, if you ever want to seek out advice on how to build a good hand, don't go looking at level 2, level 3 guys with big hands. Look at legendary arm wrestlers that control other people's hands that notoriously have a small hand or a short arm. Gabe Accardi and Ginturzi. How did they do it? Study that, and you can find out how to build an incredible hand.
Raymond Cote says, Ryan, do you do dead loads? I'm not sure what he means by that.
Dead load is not loading up. Like you give your opponent no load. Yeah.
No, I don't squeeze. I've been known to do dead loads. Yes.
I do
granny grips or whatever you want to call it. Chelsea Roberta Horrocks. Chelsea, long time no see. How are you doing? She asks, how much is age a factor in your training now? How old are you, Gabi?
44.
Oh my God. Okay, go ahead. You're the old guy, so you go ahead.
The reality is you can't run away from age. It affects us all. It's why you don't have a ton of 70-year-old arm wrestlers running around the countryside kicking ass. There's 2 reasons. Part of it's physical. Another one is as we get older and our test levels drop, our hunger or desire to compete and do things becomes less. But from a strictly physical standpoint, I believe I can do anything. I'll be able to do anything at 50 that I did at 30 theoretically. However, there is no margin for error. When I was 30, 35, 34, I remember, going to bed at night with a small pizza and a liter of Coke and waking up with a 6-pack and abs and elbows feeling great, getting on the table twice a week, pulling for 2 hours in the hook, going to tournaments 2 weeks out of every month. I can do stupid things and get away with it. When I was in my mid-20s, it was even worse. There's nothing I couldn't do. Now, you pay the price. You make mistakes, you pay the price. You're not vigilant, you pay the price. You're not disciplined, you pay the price. It can be done. There's no margin for error. And luckily, we live in a world with synthetic aids where you can mitigate or minimize the aging process to a certain degree. So you can still be a badass in your late 40s, early 50s. We've seen it. It can be done. And I'm somewhat motivated because I see great athletes in their late 40s, and I still don't believe they're doing everything they can. So I believe theoretically, if I do everything I can, everything I can control, I do to the utmost of its potential, I can become. And there's certain ways now at 44, I'm better as an arm wrestler. I'm a better athlete than I was in my 30s. Certain ways, only because I take care of the smaller details. I'm better than I ever have. But the reality is, it'll catch up to us all of us eventually. The good news is, if you're a fucking devil for the details and you're super adamant on being a good athlete in your later years, it can be done. The good news is it can be done, but the commitment is huge. You can't half-ass it. There's no half-assing it. There's no half measures.
I'm looking for some other training ones, but I don't really see too much on here. Over, Raymond Cote says, in your experience, Chris or Ryan, who do you respect the most in arm wrestling? And if there was anyone you would look to for training advice, who would it be?
Earlier in my career, I sought out Gabe Accardi a lot because he had a short arm, very small hand, and he kicked the shit out of Denny Dubray. His wins were just astronomical. So he's someone I studied. Right now, in terms of sheer force, strength, ability, and I look more towards older athletes than I do 20-year-olds because the guy I look, it would be Todd Hutchings, without a doubt. Todd Hutchings, to me, what he's doing, we all need to pay attention and open our eyes. He is Ron Bath too. What Ron Bath has done over 40 years, 30 years is just incredible. Ron Bath, for a sheer man, an arm wrestler, I think I have the utmost respect for him. He's just an absolute gentleman. He's consistent. He supports all the small things. He supports big things. He's just a pure honorable man. Todd Hutchings, in terms of training and physicality and what he's done on a biological or scientific level, the man I respect the most would be Todd Hutchings. We have to pay attention to that guy. And I still don't think he's doing everything he can, and he's still fucking doing incredible things.
Mm-hmm. As far as my opinion would go on who I respect, like, man, there's a ton of, like, that's such a broad question. I would say that John is right up there at the top. But as far as training advice would go, if I could pick anyone's brain, it would probably be Travis. And it is not necessarily because I think that he's light years ahead, but I think that Travis has got the mindset that he will do the minimal work possible for the maximal results. And I want to know exactly what he's doing to adapt it to my style of training as well. That's about the best answer I can give on that one.
And it's a lot of times people look at the best arm wrestlers and they want to follow or study what they do. And I use Devin as an example. And someone says, well, Devin told me I should do this. And the guy comes to practice. And Devin says I should do this. And I said, okay. Devin has the luxury of having a very, very long hand and a longer forearm than 99.9% of all his opponents. So he preaches height. He preaches rising. Would Devin be preaching all the things he still preached if he had the shortest forearm in the sport with a inferior sized hand? My answer is he would not. So it's very important when you seek advice from somebody who's generally has your type of move or is built kind of similar to you and has your similar challenges, because you're going to get a more realistic answer than, John Brzenk had a massively thick hand for his weight. I'm not saying you shouldn't take advice from these guys. Listen to everyone. But for me, it was more important to seek out Greg Boyce, Mike Gould, Gabe Accardi, guys that did incredible things with short forearms and inferior-sized hands. Because that's the trajectory I was going to take if I wanted to become as good as them, because we had similar builds, similar symmetries, similar frames. So, be careful with that stuff.
Yeah. Well, Gabi, we've been going 2 hours, man, so we should probably wrap this up.
Sure.
Next week, we have a guest coming on. We're not sure who it's going to be yet. We're waiting for confirmation.
I'm going to have to behave. I might have to behave.
You have to behave yourself. You have to be a nice guy from now until after then. And then going forward after that forever to that person. That shit. If they agree to come on. Yeah. Again, another thank you to our sponsor.
Absolutely.
Smirnoff Ice.
Yes, ma'am.
And we would like to say that hit subscribe on the YouTube channel, watch for the clips to come out from this show. And another announcement that we have that we never talked about is that we're available we're taking the audio and we're sticking it out there in podcast world. So right now we're on Spotify and Anchor Podcasts, and we should be on Apple Podcasts and the other platforms very shortly. So watch for that to happen. It allows you to watch or listen to the podcast in your vehicle if you're driving. And
A late shout out to Ray Cody for sending me a free Raptor handle. I appreciate it. I liked it. You got a good review, and I appreciate the support for the show and for my training. Thanks a lot, dude.
All right, man. We'll see you next week. See everyone else next week. And don't forget to send your questions into CanadianGangsters@gmail.com.
Nice.
All right, everybody. Later.
Thanks a lot.